quick. Kevin can't just let.
All right, not everybody in here is taking engine performance. However, this is not gonna hurt anybody to run through this and to see kind of what you know. If y'all are already supposed to be engine performance experts, right? Like you, and yeah, several of y'all are supposed to be. And those guys back in the back 40 over there, which, anyway, if this was your engine performance final, so now there's your answer sheet right there. We're gonna ask some questions here. And we're gonna see if we get these questions right. We're gonna swap papers when we're done. We're gonna grade our papers. And if you make a good grade on this, more power to you. If you don't, it'll be a wake-up call, right? This is not a difficult test. It's a very simple stuff. Well, I want to ask you if the washer around the base of some spark plugs is there for the primary purpose of what? Why is it there? Is it preventing compression loss, conducting heat out of the spark plug, placing the spark plug firing electrode at the proper depth, or keeping moisture out of the cylinder? Just write your answer in the box.
Okay, I already canceled that 2 of them, so this, you need one more.
If you're stressed out by tests, don't be.
It's not hard.
You know what stressed spelled backwards is? Dessert.
What?
It really is. If you take the word stressed and spell it backwards, that's dessert.
Dessert.
You've never seen that before?
Plural.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Technician A says
Wow.
positive temperature coefficient thermistors increase their resistance as the temperature increases. Technician B says as the temperature decreases, negative coefficient thermistors reduce their resistance. So who's correct about that? Positive temperature coefficient thermistors increase their resistance as the temperature increases, or as the temperature decreases. Which sensor or circuit is not checked continuously on an OBD2 system? TP sensor, MAP sensor, PCT, or O2 sensor heaters? Conventional oxygen sensors don't work until when? Which of the following would not be considered a computer input? Throttle position sensor, magnetic pulse generator, arc neutral switch, or EGR vent solenoid? All engines have some type of what system?
What's AIR? Is it air?
Air injection reactor.
Oh, okay. I thought it was air.
Now, whenever you see these little dots after each letter,
Well,
that
yeah,
means that is an
that's-
acronym.
I know, but that's why I was asking.
That's like the acronym PAID. Remember what that stands for?
Performance, attitude, integrity, dependability.
Performance, attitude, integrity, and dependability. If you have good performance, but you have a bad attitude, no integrity, and you're not dependable, you know, you can have 3 of those and not have the other one and be a failure. You can do your work. Yeah, I'm telling you, if you're short in any of those 4 areas, performance, attitude, integrity, and dependability, you know, if you perform good, you got integrity and you're dependable, but your attitude sucks, sooner or later you're gonna be gone. You know, they're gonna get enough of your junk, they're gonna send you down the road, you know. And, I've seen it happen too many times, you know. Whenever there were 25 mechanics in that shop where I worked, and I saw a lot of them come and go, you know, during the years over there. And it was always tied to one of those things, whenever one of them would get let go. Integrity means, this one guy, whenever the work would come in, he would tell the customer privately, if you'll bring this to my house, I'll do it cheaper. And he'd lay out of work the next day and it was stealing work from the shop. The service manager went by his house one day and saw one of the cars out there, you know, that was over for him. A lean air fuel mixture bums Looks like a, what's it, bums? Should say burns, outstanding. Clean air fuel mixture burns, cold and fast, hot and slow, or cold and slow. The fuel pump on a vehicle can be heard for 2 seconds at key ohms, but the engine will not start. The fuel gauge shows a full tank. Fuel pump current draw is 8.9 amps. Which of the following is least likely to be the cause? Empty fuel tank, water in the fuel tank, inoperative fuel injectors, fuel valve spark plugs.
So which one's least likely?
Least likely. All of those answers are possible, except one of them is not likely to be the cause. If the idle air control counts are 0, the engine is running rich, the engine may have a vacuum leak, the throttle plates may need to be cleaned. Both B and C are correct. What you know?
I got a blow dryer,
It ain't gonna get no better.
and they hurt.
Well, it'll get better if you don't touch it a lot. You know? Question 10. An engine's running at 243 degrees. The cooling system is full of clean coolant. The air conditioner is off, but the fans cycle on at the proper engine coolant temperature, but they never cycle off. Both heater hoses are cool to the touch. Of the following, which is the most likely to be the problem? Stuck open thermostat, bad water pump, too much heat transfer from the radiator to the ambient air, or too much hot gas EGR flow. All right. Technician A says the output of a Hall effect sensor can be checked with an AC voltmeter. Technician B says the output of a variable reluctance sensor can be tested with a lab scope. Who is correct? A only, B only, both A and B, or neither A nor B? This isn't exactly drawn right, because even these kind of sensors right here will typically have 2 wires. What was, or 3 wires, what was one thing that OBD1 regulations required after 1988 that was not previously required? One thing that OBD1 regulations required after 1988 that was not previously required. EGR system failure can cause A, higher cylinder combustion temperatures, B, pinging detonation, C, higher NOx emissions, or D, any of the above. Kendrick, are you killing this? Killing this test?
Yep, test you'll be, buddy.
A technician has been led by diagnostic trouble codes to investigate fuel trim numbers that are as follows. Short fuel trim, 1%. Long fuel trim, minus 25%. A, the fuel filter may be restricted. B, the crankcase oil may be contaminated with fuel. C, the fuel pressure may be low. Or D, any of the above. Technician A says a bad radiator cap can cause rust and corrosion buildup in a car's coolant system. Technician B says the large pipe on a heater core is generally the heater core's inlet pipe.
Oh,
Technician A says injector firing frequency is directly tied to crankshaft sensor input. Technician B says on an engine with a crankshaft sensor and a distributor, improper distributor rotor alignment can be corrected by adjusting the ignition temperature. A technician is investigating a no-start condition on a vehicle with the following PID values. What is the most likely reason for the no-start? Faulty baro sensor, weak throttle position sensor, open IAT sensor circuit? None of the above. He needs to check more PIDs. Five-cylinder engine has a firing event every how many degrees? Temperature stamped on the copper case of the thermostat's wax pellet is the temperature at which the thermostat does what? The exhaust gas recirculation valve, when fully open, generally allows no less than 10% of the exhaust gas to pass back through the intake vent. Technician A says this is to reburn some of the exhaust gas. Technician B says this is done to cool the combustion chamber. Who's correct? Kendrick, you already answered one? Technician A says late ignition timing can cause a speed density fuel injection system to run rich and force the fuel trim readings to the negative. Technician B says an erroneously low baro reading will drive fuel trim figures to the positive. Who's correct? If the vehicle speed signal is suddenly lost at road speed, what generally happens? A, the speedometer needle drops to zero. B, the speed control suddenly becomes dysfunctional. C, the transmission drops back to first gear. D, all of the above. If an engine with an automatic transmission is placed in drive with the brakes locked and the engine accelerated to wide open throttle, what information might be gleaned from watching the stall speed on the tachometer?
okay. It can be none of these, but it could be all of these, but which one would be none of these?
Don't you just love the ones with all those choices? Less likely to guess your way out of that one, huh?
True. Well, you know that G, because it can't be all of the above and none of the above at the same time.
That's a thinker. He's actually applying the pumpkin. vehicle is traveling down a straight highway with a short and long fuel trims hovering near zero. Suddenly, a spark plug on bank 2 fails and begins misfiring. What will happen to the O2 sensor signal on that bank when this takes place? The moment it takes place, what does the oxygen sensor signal on that misfiring plug bank do? If you switch on the ignition and hear the fuel pump, what do you know?
Well, do that. Always got one, right?
Is that good? All right. Everybody got all their questions answered? All right. Trade papers with somebody you don't like.
Appreciate it.
Right now, I like it. Because, who is this outside?
That's probably Timothy. It sounds like Timothy. Because he drags in about this late after lunch, and that sounds like his ratty old truck.
Savage.
This one here is B. It's there to conduct heat out of the spark plug.
Do we just put a check mark next to it if it's wrong?
Yeah. That's probably the only one anybody will miss though. Ignition A says positive temperature coefficient sensor, blah, blah, blah. That's A only. Negative temperature coefficient thermistors actually decrease their resistance as they get hotter, which is the opposite of what you'd expect. A light bulb is a positive temperature coefficient thermistor. I recognize the sound of that truck and all that. You missed the test. Whoever got Timothy's paper, give him a 0. All right, this is D. O2 sensor heaters can only be checked whenever you're looking at the different monitors. You got continuous monitors, and then you got monitors where certain criteria has to be met. For example, the engine controller cannot check the catalytic converter unless it's been driving for a certain amount of time at a certain speed. Then the oxygen sensor, you know, the fuel trim monitor, got to be in closed loop and all that. There are certain things that have to be happening, like also the evaporative system will not measure the integrity of the evaporative if it's got between, unless it has between 15 and 85% fuel. If it's full all the time or empty all the time, why should you not run your gas tank empty all the time or real close to empty, like Tim does? What's up with that? Why should you not? Somebody give me a reason.
You can't check the evaporative.
That's part of it, but the other part of it is, if you're running real close to empty all the time, you may be cavitating and getting some air in there and may wear the fuel pump out quicker. Also, if you got a lot of empty real estate inside that tank, water has a tendency to condense in there. Now, it's not so much a big deal if it's a plastic tank, but if it's a metal tank, you know, you're gonna have a rusty inside innards on your tank and everything else. You know. You bring me some stuff there, Hot Rod? No, come on, I'll sign the paper in here. 600 degrees. This is the next question. That's alpha. 600 degrees. Now, the newer ones. There you go. The newer sensors have to reach 1400 degrees. How many of you guys have come across that module in electric?
Oh, no, let's do we did in the shop, but yeah, get
What is that oil and filter for?
I don't know, he told me to bring it.
Yeah, I guess I probably shouldn't. Brake fluid I knew about, yeah. There you
All
go.
right, thank you, y'all have a good day.
Thank you, sir.
Is it in the box going back or return to?
That is, they're going back. Which of the following would not be considered a computer input? Somebody better tell me a good answer on this one, and why. Not be an input, and why? Come on.
It would be an output.
If it's not an input, which one would be an output?
The EGR event solenoid.
Bingo. It's an output, not an input. Got it? All engines have some type of PCV system. What's PCV stand for?
Positive crankcase ventilation.
Positive crankcase ventilation, good job. Clean air, lean air fuel mixture burns hot and fast. A rich mixture burns cold and slow. If you've got a rich mixture, if I pull a spark plug out and it's running rich, what's that spark plug gonna look like?
Similar gas on it,
Not necessarily, I mean, it can be dry, but it can be sooty. If it's got soot on it, but it's dry, it's running rich. If it's running really rich, it's gonna be having hydrocarbons coming out the exhaust to have a wet plug. If it's running just mildly rich, it's gonna have carbon monoxide coming out the exhaust and it'll have a sooty plug. If it's running really, really lean, it'll have a snowy white ceramic on that plug usually. This one right here, now what do we know about this? We know it's not an empty fuel tank. Why? Why do we know the fuel tank is not empty?
because if it was empty, it would be reading less amps.
That's right. It's not gonna be reading 8.9 amps with an empty gas tank unless there's something wrong with the fuel pump. So it's gonna, how much will it read if the tank's empty?
I think it's like around 4 or something.
1.5 amps, something like that?
I thought, what was 4 amps?
Now, the Crown Victoria, whenever that we've got out here, if you're measuring the current on that one, it'll read about 4 amps when it's got gas in it. But about 1.5 amps is all it's gonna read when it ain't pumping fuel, it's just spinning free. It ain't pulling anything in. If the idle air control counts are 0, the engine may have a vacuum leak, because it's trying to correct for a high idle, it's gonna close that idle air control all the way off, you see. That's the deal on that. Engine's running at 245, bad water pump. Now what do you know? Air conditioner's not on, it heats up, heats up, heats up, fan kicks on, never kicks back off, you got trouble. If it keeps getting warmer and warmer, the fan keeps running, you better find out what's going on. You're gonna cook him, all that. I have actually seen one though, that was running hot like that because the antifreeze was old. And it wasn't rusty or nothing, but I replaced the coolant and it made it run cool. I mean, and that was on a Eagle Medallion a long time ago.
Well, the thing about question 10 is it said that it had clean coolant in it.
That one does, that's right. But that particular one, the most likely cause would be work on. Technician A says, the output, cool, I don't know what that is, but I'll take it. All right, thank you. Look, I have a box. No idea what that is. Technician B says the output of a variable reluctance sensor we check with B only. You cannot check a Hall effect sensor with an ohm meter. You can't check it with an ohm meter. If you're just going in there with your 2 meters to measure the resistance, you're not gonna get anything. But you can measure both of those with a loud scope. One thing an OBD2 required was a dash-mounted warning light. And even after that, Jeep tried to not put one on there for a long time. Ford didn't have a check engine light until 1988, which is pretty cool because it kept the customers from coming in there all the time saying, my dadgum check engine light won't go off, you know. And General Motors had them from 1981 up. And a lot of people that drove those GM cars in the early days said the only thing that consistently worked on that car all the time was the check engine light. It always worked. But as you know, we had a guy that brought his pickup truck in here. Well, the same guy that you checked the codes for on the Volkswagen the other day. He brought his pickup truck in here. It was a 98 F-150. And he said one of the complaints that he wanted fixed was the check engine light. Check engine light didn't work. He wanted that fixed. I said, oh, wonderful. Now we'll fix the check engine light. He'll be in here every time you turn around with a check engine light on. And there he hadn't, you know, I mean, after all. EGR system failure can cause all the above. Higher NOx emissions, pinging, detonation, higher cylinder combustion chamber temperatures. You take some inert gas, you put it back in there, it doesn't burn as hot. Doesn't make the oxides of nitrogen. But we got nitrogen, oxygen, they lock together when it goes over 2,500 degrees, that's what that's about. Technician's been led by DTCs to investigate fuel trim numbers. The crankcase oil may have been contaminated with fuel. How do we know this? Long fuel trim means what, Professor? Long fuel trim negative? I should have said negative long fuel trim means what? That means it's subtracting fuel. Okay, so how would a contaminated crankcase oil cause it to run richer?
Because of gas in the
The
oil.
PCV system. is gonna be pulling gas vapors and running them through the mix, got it? As a matter of fact, one of the tests that Ford used to have us do back in the day, I think in the 80s when we first started getting this fuel injection stuff and all, is they would say if you got one that's running rich, the first thing they wanted you to do was pull the EGR valve, not the EGR, the PCV valve, and stop it up so that it couldn't get any air. And if you pull the PCV valve of the crankcase and it normalized, then you know it needed an oil change. That still works today. I've actually had vehicles come to me and the only thing wrong with them was they needed an oil change. Running rich. Subtracting fuel. All that. Technician A says a bad radiator cap can cause rust and corrosion buildup. Technician A is right. If air can come and go, whatever it wants to out of there, what's in that air? Oxygen. What does oxygen do? It causes oxidation. What's oxidation? Rust. What's free radicals? Yeah, in your system. You know? Remember that one James Bond movie said, you gotta go to the health club because you've been drinking this caviar and drinking too many dry martinis and your system's full of free radicals. You gotta get all cleaned out. So on the way out the door, Moneypenny says, what are they sitting to do today, Mr. Bond? He goes, eliminate all free radicals. And she goes, oh. Supposed to go kill everybody, right? All right. Technician A says the injector firing frequency is directly tied to crankshaft sensor input. He's correct. But on an engine with a crankshaft sensor, you ain't gonna turn the distributor and change the timing if that's the trigger. That caveat, 2001, Xterra. You can set the timing on that one even though it's got a crank sensor. But it'll also run if you unplug the crank sensor on a 2001 Xterra, because all it's using the crank sensor for is misfire monitoring. That is a strange bird. You remember when we put the radiator in? And we put the distributor in too. All right. What's wrong with this? What are you seeing? What do you see that's unusual? I'm seeing two temperature sensors that are reading real close, and one temperature sensor is reading way up high. This is going to be your OEM enhanced. It's substituting that value for something it knows is wrong. And that can cause problems if the temperature gets down like that. So you got an open IAT sensor circuit. If you go into your OBD2 room and you look in there, you're going to see 40 below zero. Yes, sir?
How can temperature be a half an hour?
How can it be what?
That half an hour. That they can tell you that one was wrong because it's happy to be 101 degrees or that it was.
It's not. It actually, it sees it, like if you unplug it, or if you cut the wire, it's gonna read 40 below. And the engine controller says, I'm seeing 45 and 47, I know it ain't 40 below. So it goes ahead and substitutes a value that it thinks is close enough to where it'll crank and run. You got me? That's a substitution value. The engine controller is smart enough to where it can put a different number in there if it decides it wants
I
to.
saw that and I was like.
He was like, no way.
If it don't start, then.
5-cylinder engine has a fire event over 144 degrees. How do we arrive at that? How many times does the crankshaft turn for it to complete a cycle? How many degrees? What's 2 times 360? 720. What's 5 into 720? 144. If you take your number of cylinders and you go into 720, you're going to find out how often there's a fire in there. Temperature stamped on the copper case of the thermostat black pouch when it starts to open. EGR valve when fully open, that's Tech B. Tech B says it's done to cool a combustion chamber. We talked about that earlier. A says the late ignition timing can cause a speed density fuel system to run rich, force the trim readings to the negative. That's both. B says erroneously low barrel reading, if it thinks you're at high altitude, it's basically going to drive them positive because it won't be putting enough fuel in there because it thinks you're at a high altitude. Oxygen sensor says, hey, what are you doing? I'm not getting enough fuel down here. And so the fuel trim goes up. It increases the fuel. The PCM says, okay, give me some more gas down here. That's how that works. If the vehicle speed signal is suddenly lost at road speed, all of these will happen. You probably got that one right, didn't you?